The rain poured down on the busy city streets as the evening lights began to flicker on. Maylin pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders, but it did little to keep out the chill that had settled deep in her bones. Her stomach growled loudly, a painful reminder that she hadn't eaten in nearly 2 days. The city looked different from what she had imagined. In her small village, people had spoken of tall buildings touching the sky and streets filled with opportunity. What they hadn't mentioned were the cold stares of strangers, the overwhelming noise, or how quickly her small savings would disappear. Maylin clutched her backpack, which contained everything she owned in the world: a change of clothes, a worn notebook filled with her handwritten music, and a faded photograph of her grandmother. Her grandmother had been the one who taught her to play piano on the old out-of-tune instrument at the village school. "Your fingers speak what your heart feels," she would say. Now those words were all Maylin had left of her. She had spent her last coins on the bus fare to the city 3 days ago. Her plan had seemed so clear then: find work, save money, and eventually audition for the prestigious music academy. But reality had quickly crushed those dreams. No one wanted to hire a 16-year-old girl with no experience, no references, and no permanent address. The restaurant across the street caught her eye. Through the large windows, she could see people inside, warm and dry, eating meals that made her mouth water. The soft glow from the chandeliers spilled onto the sidewalk almost like an invitation. A sign in the window read, "Bellini's Fine Dining." "Just one night," she whispered to herself. "I just need to get through tonight." Gathering her courage, Maylin crossed the street and pushed open the heavy glass door. Warmth enveloped her immediately, along with the rich aroma of food that made her dizzy with hunger. A few heads turned in her direction, eyebrows raised at her appearance. Her once neat hair hung in damp strands around her face, and her clothes were wrinkled and dirty from sleeping in the bus station the night before. A tall man in a crisp black suit approached her with a frown. "Can I help you?" His tone suggested that he wasn't actually interested in helping at all. Maylin's voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I was wondering if you needed any help. I can wash dishes or clean tables. I don't need much money, just something to eat." The man, the restaurant manager, she assumed, looked her up and down. His eyes narrowed. "This is a fine dining establishment, not a charity. We don't need any help, please," Maylin said softly. "I haven't eaten in 2 days. I could work for just one meal." "No," the manager said firmly. "We can't have someone like you in here. You'll scare away the customers." He gestured toward the door. "Please leave before I have to call security." Heat rose to Maylin's cheeks. "Someone like me?" she repeated. A few nearby diners had stopped eating to watch the exchange, their expressions a mix of discomfort and curiosity. The manager leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "Look at yourself. You're soaking wet. You look like you haven't showered in days, and this is a respectable place. Now please go before you cause a scene." Tears welled in Maylin's eyes, but she blinked them back. She wouldn't cry here, not in front of these people. As she turned to leave, something caught her eye: a grand piano in the corner of the restaurant. It sat on a small raised platform, its polished black surface gleaming under the soft lighting. Currently it was unattended. An idea sparked in her mind. A crazy, desperate idea. Instead of heading for the exit, Maylin straightened her shoulders and walked directly toward the piano. She heard the manager's footsteps hurrying behind her. "What do you think you're doing?" "I told you to leave." Maylin ignored him. She reached the piano and sat down on the bench before anyone could stop her. Her fingers hovered over the keys for just a moment as she took a deep breath. "Security," the manager called out. "Someone get this girl out of here!" But Maylin had already begun to play. Her fingers danced across the keys with a skill that belied her young age and disheveled appearance. The piece was her own composition, something she had created during lonely nights after her grandmother passed away. It began softly, almost hesitantly, like raindrops on a window, each note clear and distinct. The restaurant grew quiet. The manager's call for security trailed off into silence. Maylin closed her eyes, letting the music flow through her. The melody grew stronger, more confident as she poured her story into the keys. The loss of her grandmother, her only family. The journey to the city filled with hope. The harsh reality of rejection and hunger. The music spoke of pain but also of resilience, of a spirit that refused to be broken. Her fingers moved faster, the music building to a crescendo that filled the entire restaurant. She was no longer aware of the diners watching her, or the manager standing frozen nearby, or even her own hunger. There was only the music, the extension of her soul. When the final notes faded away, Mei-Lin kept her eyes closed for a moment longer, afraid to break the spell. When she finally looked up, she was met with stunned silence. Then someone began to clap. Slowly at first, then others joined in until the whole restaurant was filled with applause. Some people were standing. A few were wiping tears from their eyes. The manager stood closest to her, his mouth slightly open, all traces of his previous disdain gone. Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked. Mei-Lin shrugged slightly. "My grandmother taught me the basics. The rest I taught myself." An older woman approached from a nearby table. She had elegantly styled silver hair and wore an expensive-looking silk scarf. "Young lady, that was extraordinary. I've attended concerts at the finest venues around the world, and I've rarely heard playing with such emotional depth." "Thank you," Mei-Lin whispered, feeling overwhelmed by the attention. The woman turned to the manager. "Vincent, I believe this young woman deserves a meal, don't you think?" The manager, Vincent, nodded quickly, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Of course, Mrs. Wu, right away." He turned to Mei-Lin. "Please follow me to a table." Mei-Lin stood up from the piano bench, her legs shaky. The restaurant had returned to a buzz of conversation, but now many eyes followed her with interest rather than disdain. Vincent led her to a small table in the corner and pulled out a chair. "I'll have the kitchen prepare something special for you." On the house, of course. His tone had completely changed, now overly polite, almost servile. "Thank you," Mei-Lin said quietly. As the manager hurried away, the woman with silver hair, Mrs. Wu, approached her table. "May I join you for a moment?" Mei-Lin nodded, and Mrs. Wu gracefully took the seat across from her. "My name is HOA Wu. I'm on the board of directors at the City Symphony Orchestra." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card.
Sliding it across the table.
"What you just played? It wasn't a classical piece I recognized." "It's something I wrote," Mei-Lin admitted. "After my grandmother died." Mrs. Wu's eyebrows rose. "You composed that yourself?" Even more impressive. She studied Mei-Lin with keen eyes. "You're not from here, are you?" "You've just arrived in the city?" Mei-Lin hesitated, then nodded slowly. There was no point in hiding it. Her situation was obvious enough. "Do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" Mrs. Wu asked gently. Mei-Lin looked down at her hands. "I'll find somewhere." A waiter appeared with a steaming bowl of soup and placed it in front of her. The rich aroma made Mei-Lin's mouth water, but she hesitated, suddenly self-conscious about eating in front of this elegant woman. "Please, eat while it's hot," Mrs. Wu encouraged her. Mei-Lin picked up the spoon and took a small sip of the soup. It was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted, and it took all her willpower not to gulp it down. Mrs. Wu waited until she had taken a few more spoonfuls before speaking again. "I have a proposition for you. The orchestra is hosting a special event this weekend, and one of our featured pianists has fallen ill. Based on what I just heard, I believe you could fill that spot." Mei-Lin nearly choked on her soup. "Me play with the orchestra?" "It would be a paid performance," Mrs. Wu continued. "And I know of a small apartment where you could stay temporarily. It belongs to the orchestra. We use it for visiting musicians." Mei-Lin couldn't believe what she was hearing. This morning she had been considering returning to her village in defeat. Now this woman was offering her a chance, a real chance to pursue her dream. "Why would you do this for me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't even know me," Mrs. Wu smiled. "True talent is rare, my dear. When I see it, I don't let it slip away." She reached across the table and patted Mei-Lin's hand. "Besides, everyone deserves a chance. Sometimes we just need someone to open the door." As more food arrived at her table and Mrs. Wu began explaining the details of the upcoming concert, Mei-Lin felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Real hope that perhaps her journey wasn't over before it had properly begun. Outside, the rain continued to fall on the busy city streets, but for the first time since arriving, Mei-Lin no longer felt cold. The following morning, Mei-Lin woke up in an unfamiliar bed. For a moment, panic gripped her as she tried to remember where she was. Then it all came flooding back: the restaurant, the piano, Mrs. Wu's offer. She sat up slowly, taking in her surroundings. The apartment was small but clean and comfortable. Sunshine streamed through lace curtains, casting patterns on the wooden floor. A single bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom. It wasn't much, but to Mei Lin, who had spent the previous night huddled in a bus station, it felt like a palace. On the bedside table sat a note from Mrs. Wu along with some cash and a set of keys. The note explained that the apartment was hers to use for the next month. The money was an advance on her performance fee for the weekend concert. Mrs. Wu had also written down her phone number and the address of the concert hall where Mei Lin would need to go for rehearsals. After a hot shower, her first in days, Mei Lin felt like a new person. She changed into her cleanest clothes. Though she made a mental note to find a laundromat soon, her stomach rumbled, reminding her that despite last night's meal, she was still hungry. The kitchen cupboards were bare except for some tea and sugar, so she decided to venture out to find breakfast with some of the advance money. As she stepped onto the street, the city felt different in the morning light. Less intimidating, more full of possibility. She found a small cafe 2 blocks away and ordered a simple breakfast of eggs and toast. As she ate, she watched people rushing by outside the window, all heading somewhere important, all with purpose. Soon, she would have purpose too. She pulled out the sheet music Mrs. Wu had given her last night, a challenging piece by Chopin that she would perform with the orchestra. She studied it as she ate, her fingers tapping out rhythms on the tabletop. A television mounted on the cafe wall was showing the morning news. Mei Lin paid it little attention until she heard the words, "mysterious pianist and social media sensation." Her head snapped up. On the screen was grainy footage of her playing at the restaurant last night. The camera angle suggested it had been filmed by one of the diners on a phone. Video has already reached over 2 million views online, the news anchor was saying. The identity of the young musician remains unknown, but her impromptu performance at Bellini's restaurant last night has captivated viewers around the world. Mei Lin nearly choked on her tea. The footage showed her playing, her eyes closed, completely lost in the music. Then it cut to interviews with some of the diners. "It was the most moving thing I've ever heard," a woman said. You could feel her story in every note. Another diner, a middle-aged man in a business suit, said, "I've been going to classical concerts for 20 years and I've never experienced anything like it." The raw emotion was incredible. The waitress at the cafe noticed Mei Lin's expression. "Are you okay, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost." That's me," Mei Lin whispered, pointing at the television. The waitress squinted at the screen, then back at Mei Lin. Her eyes widened. "No way, that's really you?" Before Mei Lin could respond, the waitress had called out to the rest of the cafe. "Hey everyone! This girl is the pianist from that viral video." Suddenly all eyes were on her. People pulled out their phones, and before she knew what was happening, they were taking pictures and asking questions. "What's your name? Are you a professional pianist? Where did you learn to play like that? Can you play something for us now?" Overwhelmed, Mei Lin grabbed her things and hurried out of the cafe, leaving half her breakfast uneaten. Outside, she took deep breaths, trying to calm her racing heart. She wasn't used to attention. In her village, she had been known as the quiet girl who played piano at the school. No one had ever made a fuss over her before. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Wu. "Have you seen the news? Call me immediately." Mei Lin found a quiet corner in a nearby park and called. "The video of your performance has gone viral," Mrs. Wu said without preamble. "Every news outlet in the city is trying to find out who you are." "I don't understand," Mei Lin said. "It was just a simple piece I wrote." "Nothing special, nothing special," Mrs. Wu chuckled. "My dear, you've struck a chord with people, if you'll forgive the pun. There's something about your playing that speaks to them." "What should I do?" Mei Lin asked, feeling lost. "Come to the concert hall now. We need to change our plans." An hour later, Mei Lin stood on the stage of the city concert hall, a grand space that could seat nearly 2,000 people. The hall was empty except for Mrs. Wu, the orchestra conductor named Mr. Chen, and a few orchestra members who were practicing in small groups. "Play the piece from last night," Mr. Chen instructed after introductions were made, the one in the video. Nervous under his stern gaze, Mei Lin sat at the magnificent grand piano on stage. This instrument was far superior to any she had ever played, even the one at the restaurant. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The few orchestra members who were present stopped their practice to listen. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before Mr. Chen spoke. "Change of plans," he said to Mrs. Wu. She'll play this piece for the concert, not the Chopin. But I've barely started learning the Chopin, Mei Lin protested. I can practice more. Mr. Chen shook his head. No, your composition is what people want to hear. The concert is sold out, sold out? Mei Lin echoed. But how, when? Since this morning, Mrs. Wu explained. Once we announced that we had found the mystery pianist, tickets sold out within 2 hours. Mei Lin felt dizzy. Yesterday, she had been homeless and hungry. Today, people were buying tickets to hear her play. And that's not all, Mrs. Wu continued. We've had calls from 3 record labels and several television programs. They all want to meet you. I don't understand why, Mei Lin said honestly. I'm not trained. I never went to music school. That's exactly why, Mr. Chen said. Your playing isn't technically perfect, but it has something many trained musicians lack. Genuine emotion. You play from the heart, not just from memory or technique. The next 2 days passed in a blur of rehearsals, interviews, and preparation. Mrs. Wu helped Mei Lin buy a simple but elegant black dress for the performance and fielded the endless phone calls from media outlets. The night of the concert arrived, and Mei Lin stood backstage, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Through a gap in the curtains, she could see the concert hall filled to capacity. People in formal attire chatted excitedly, programs in hand. Are you ready? Mrs. Wu asked, appearing beside her. No, Mei Lin admitted. I'm terrified, Mrs. Wu squeezed her hand. That's normal. Even musicians who have been performing for decades get stage fright. What if I make a mistake? What if they don't like my playing? They will, Mrs. Wu said confidently. Just play like you did at the restaurant. Play your story. The orchestra began the opening piece of the evening. Mei Lin would perform in the second half. As she listened to the beautiful music, her mind drifted back to her village, to the old piano in the school where her grandmother had first taught her to play. What would her grandmother think of all this? She would be proud, Mei Lin decided, but she would also remind her to stay humble, to remember where she came from. When intermission came, the backstage area became a flurry of activity. Orchestra members adjusted their instruments, sipped water, and prepared for the second half. Mr. Chen approached Mei Lin. There's someone here to see you, he said, and gestured toward a figure standing in the shadows. It was Vincent, the restaurant manager who had initially tried to throw her out. He looked uncomfortable in his suit, clutching a bouquet of flowers. I came to apologize, he said, stiffly holding out the flowers, and to wish you luck tonight. Mei Lin accepted the bouquet with a small smile. Thank you. I was wrong about you, he continued. I judged you by your appearance, and I'm ashamed of that. Before Mei Lin could respond, a stagehand called out, 5 minutes. Vincent nodded awkwardly and retreated, leaving Mei Lin with her flowers and her thoughts. His apology meant something to her, a reminder that people could change, that first impressions weren't always final. As the orchestra finished their piece, applause thundered through the concert hall. Mr. Chen motioned for Mei Lin to take her place. She walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. The applause grew louder when people recognized her from the video. She sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and took a deep breath. The hall fell silent, 2,000 people waiting for her to begin. In that moment, Mei Lin felt a strange calm settle over her. She closed her eyes briefly, picturing her grandmother's face, remembering her words. Your fingers speak what your heart feels. She began to play. The melody filled the vast space, reaching every corner of the hall. As she played, she thought about her journey, the hardships, the hunger, the rejection, but also the kindness she had encountered, the opportunities that had opened up, the people who had believed in her when she had almost stopped believing in herself. By the time she played the final note, tears were streaming down her face. For a heartbeat, there was complete silence. Then the audience rose to their feet, applause and cheers echoing throughout the hall. Flowers were thrown onto the stage. People wiped tears from their eyes. Mei Lin stood and bowed, overwhelmed by the response. As she looked out at the sea of faces all focused on her, all moved by her music, she realized something important. Her hunger had led her to that restaurant. Her desperation had given her the courage to sit at that piano. Sometimes the darkest moments could lead to the brightest opportunities. As she took another bow, Mei Lin knew that this was just the beginning of her story. Mei Lin stood frozen in the wings of the stage, still clutching her bouquet as the thunderous applause continued. She had already taken 5 curtain calls, but the audience showed no signs of letting her leave. Her legs trembled, partly from exhaustion and partly from the overwhelming emotion of the moment. "Go on," Mr. Chen urged, giving her a gentle push. One more bow. She stepped back onto the stage, the bright lights warming her face. The entire audience was standing, their applause washing over her like a wave. In the front row, Mrs. Wu beamed proudly. Next to her sat several people in expensive suits. Representatives from record labels, Mei Lin guessed, though she had been introduced to so many people in the past 2 days that their faces blurred together. After a final deep bow, Mei Lin retreated backstage, where orchestra members patted her back and offered congratulations. Their words barely registered as she made her way to the small dressing room she'd been assigned. Alone at last, she sank into a chair and took a deep breath. Her phone buzzed with notifications, more than she could count. News alerts, social media mentions, messages from numbers she didn't recognize. She switched it off and closed her eyes, trying to process everything that had happened. A knock at the door interrupted her moment of quiet. "Come in," she called. Mrs. Wu entered, followed by a tall woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes. "Mei Lin, this is Lian Zhao, the director of the National Conservatory of Music." Mei Lin stood up quickly, nearly knocking over her chair. The National Conservatory was the most prestigious music school in the country, the very place she had dreamed of attending, but knew she could never afford. "Your performance was exceptional," Director Zhao said, studying Mei Lin with an intensity that made her want to shrink away. "Mrs. Wu tells me you've had no formal training." "Just what my grandmother taught me," Mei Lin replied softly. "She was the music teacher at our village school." "Remarkable." Director Zhao exchanged glances with Mrs. Wu. "We would like to offer you a full scholarship to the conservatory, beginning with the next term." Mei Lin's mouth fell open. "A scholarship, but don't I need to audition?" Director Zhao's lips curved in a rare smile. "You just did, in front of 2,000 people." Tears welled up in Mei Lin's eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Mrs. Wu encouraged. Before Mei Lin could respond, there was another knock at the door. This time, a young woman with a press badge poked her head in. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there are reporters waiting for a statement from Mei Lin, and there's someone from World Music Records who insists on speaking with her tonight." Mrs. Wu sighed. "I told them all interviews would be tomorrow." "It's the viral video," the young woman explained apologetically. "It just hit 50 million views an hour ago. Every news outlet wants to be the first to interview her." Mei Lin's head spun. 50 million? That was more people than she could even imagine. "Tell them we'll do one brief press conference now," Mrs. Wu decided. 5 minutes, no more. And then Mei Lin needs rest. The next hour passed in a blur of camera flashes and shouted questions. Mei Lin stood at a podium in the concert hall lobby, Mrs. Wu protectively at her side. She answered questions about her background, her music, and her plans for the future, though she hardly knew what those were herself. "How does it feel to go from being homeless to a worldwide sensation in just 3 days?" one reporter asked. The question struck Mei Lin like a physical blow. Put that way, the contrast in her circumstances seemed almost unreal. "It doesn't feel real," she answered honestly. 3 nights ago, I was hungry and had nowhere to go. Now people want to hear my music. I'm grateful, but I'm also scared." "Scared of what?" another reporter called out. Mei Lin hesitated, trying to find the right words. "Scared that I won't live up to expectations. That I don't deserve all this attention." "And that concludes our press conference," Mrs. Wu interrupted smoothly. "Mei Lin needs her rest. Thank you all for coming." She guided Mei Lin through the crowd and into a waiting car. As they drove away from the concert hall, Mei Lin leaned her head against the cool window glass and watched the city lights blur past. "You did wonderfully tonight," Mrs. Wu said. "Both on stage and with the press. Your honesty is refreshing. Most young artists try to appear more confident than they feel." "I don't know how to be anything but honest," Mei Lin replied. "Everything is happening so fast." "That's the nature of fame in the digital age," Mrs. Wu said. "But remember, you earned this. Your talent and your story touched people's hearts. That's why they respond to you." When they reached the small apartment, Mrs. Wu helped Mei Lin carry up the numerous bouquets she had received. "Try to get some sleep," she advised. "Tomorrow will be another busy day." But sleep didn't come easily. Mei Lin lay awake, replaying the concert in her mind, wondering what her grandmother would think of all this. Eventually, she got up and sat at the small table by the window, watching the quiet street below. She took out her notebook and began to compose a new piece, letting her tumultuous emotions flow through her fingers and onto the page. Morning came with a knock on her door. It was Mrs. Wu, already dressed impeccably, carrying coffee and pastries. "I thought you might need breakfast," she said, setting down the food. "And this." She handed Mei Lin a newspaper. Mei Lin's photograph was on the front page. Under the headline, "From Hunger to Fame, the viral pianist who captivated the world." Inside was a full-page story about her, including quotes from audience members at the concert and music critics who praised her raw emotional power and natural genius. "There are offers coming in from everywhere," Mrs. Wu said, pulling out her tablet and showing Mei Lin a spreadsheet. 3 record labels want to sign you. 5 television shows want you as a guest. 2 piano manufacturers want you to endorse their instruments. And the National Symphony wants you to tour with them next season. Mei Lin put down her coffee cup with shaking hands. "I don't know anything about record deals or endorsements." "That's why you need a manager," Mrs. Wu said gently. "Someone to guide you through all of this. I've taken the liberty of arranging meetings with several reputable management agencies today. Would you consider being my manager?" Mei Lin asked hesitantly. "You're the only person I trust." Mrs. Wu looked surprised, then touched. "I'm honored, but I'm not a professional manager. I can help you find someone good, though, and I'll stay involved as your mentor if you'd like." Mei Lin nodded gratefully. "Yes, please." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Mei Lin signed with a kind but firm manager named Fang, who had worked with classical musicians for decades. She did interviews with major news outlets, played on 2 television shows, and signed a record deal that included a generous advance, enough for her to rent a proper apartment, and send money back to her village to help rebuild the school, where she had first learned to play. Director Zhao from the conservatory arranged for Mei Lin to have private lessons with the school's best teachers to prepare her for formal study. Though she had natural talent, there were technical aspects of piano playing she had never been taught, and she threw herself into learning with the same determination that had kept her going during her difficult journey to the city. Through it all, the original video of her playing at the restaurant continued to spread around the world. People created remixes of her music, wrote stories about her, and sent countless messages of support. A children's charity asked if they could use her story to inspire young people, and Mei Lin agreed immediately, happy that her experience might help others. One rainy afternoon, nearly a month after the concert, Mei Lin sat in a coffee shop with Fang, reviewing her schedule for the coming weeks. "Your first official recording session is next Monday," Fang reminded her. 3 days in the studio to record your original compositions." Mei Lin nodded, trying to quell the butterflies in her stomach. Despite all that had happened, she still couldn't quite believe that people wanted to hear her music. "And then there's the matter of the restaurant," Fang continued, flipping to the next page in her planner. "The restaurant?" Mei Lin asked, confused. "Bellini's, where it all began." Fang smiled. "They've asked if you would consider playing there once a month. They're calling it Return to the Beginning and want to make it a special event. They'll donate all proceeds to a program providing musical education to underprivileged children." Tears pricked at Mei Lin's eyes. "Yes," she said immediately. "I'd love to do that." As they continued their meeting, Mei Lin noticed a young girl at a nearby table watching her with wide eyes. After a few minutes, the girl approached shyly, clutching a notebook. "Excuse me," she said in a small voice. "Are you the piano girl from the video?" Mei Lin smiled warmly. "Yes, I am. I started taking piano lessons because of you," the girl said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "My mom said if you could learn to play so beautifully in a village school, then I can learn too." Touched, Mei Lin asked, "What's your nar?" "Ling," the girl replied. "It's very nice to meet you, Ling. How are your lessons going?" "Hard," Ling admitted, "but I practice every day. My teacher says I'm making good progress." "That's the secret," Mei Lin told her. "Practice and never give up even when it's difficult." The girl's mother approached, apologizing for the interruption, but Mei Lin assured her it was fine. She signed Ling's notebook with a personal message of encouragement. After they left, Fang remarked, "That's happening more and more often, isn't it? People recognizing you? Mei-Lin nodded. It still feels strange. I'm not used to it. You'll need to get used to it, Fang said. Your story resonates with people because it gives them hope. In a world full of carefully cultivated images and privileged backgrounds, you're authentic. You remind people that talent can come from anywhere and that sometimes the most difficult circumstances can lead to extraordinary opportunities. As they finished their meeting and stepped outside into the light rain, Mei-Lin thought about how much her life had changed in just 1 month. From hunger and homelessness to recognition and opportunity. From being turned away at a restaurant door to having her photograph on the front page of newspapers. But the most important change, she realized, wasn't external at all. It was the newfound confidence she felt, the belief that her music mattered, that her voice deserved to be heard. That, more than anything else, was the true miracle of her journey. 6 months had passed since Mei-Lin's life had changed at Bellini's restaurant. The seasons had shifted from winter to summer, and the city hummed with energy under the warm sun. Mei-Lin sat in the back of a sleek black car, watching buildings flash by as she was driven to her next appointment. Your schedule today, her assistant Jen said, reading from a tablet. Recording session until noon, lunch meeting with the symphony director, interview with Music Monthly at 2, and then the charity event at 6. Mei-Lin nodded, though her mind was elsewhere. Her debut album had been released last month and had climbed to the top of the classical charts worldwide. Critics had praised her emotional depth and raw authenticity, while fans continued to share her story across social media. Oh, and Mrs. Wu called, Jen added. She wants to know if you're free for dinner tomorrow night. Yes, please tell her yes, Mei-Lin replied, brightening at the mention of her mentor. Despite her busy schedule, she made time to see Mrs. Wu at least once a week. Their dinners together were a comforting reminder of how her journey had begun. The car pulled up outside the recording studio, a converted warehouse with brick walls and high ceilings. Mei-Lin had spent countless hours here over the past months, recording her original compositions and, more recently, working on arrangements for a new project. Inside, the producer Hui greeted her with a warm smile. Ready to try something different today? Mei-Lin nodded. I've been practicing the piece we discussed. They had been experimenting with blending her classical piano style with traditional folk music from her home region. It was a project close to Mei-Lin's heart, a way to honor her roots while embracing her new path. As she sat at the piano, Mei-Lin closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. The studio was quiet, the sound engineers waiting behind the glass partition. She began to play, her fingers dancing across the keys in a melody that spoke of green mountains, flowing rivers, and the simple life she had once known. Time disappeared when she played. 2 hours passed in what felt like minutes, and when she finally paused, Hui's voice came through the speakers. Beautiful, Mei-Lin. Absolutely beautiful. Come listen. She joined him in the control room where he played back the recording. Hearing her own music, Mei-Lin felt a familiar mixture of pride and disbelief. Sometimes she still couldn't quite accept that this was her life now, that people around the world listened to and appreciated her playing. It's missing something, she said thoughtfully. Perhaps traditional instruments to accompany the middle section? To bring out the folk elements more strongly? I nodded. I was thinking the same thing. I know some musicians who specialize in traditional instruments. We could bring them in next week. After finalizing plans for the next recording session, Mei-Lin headed to her lunch meeting. The restaurant was one of the city's finest, with large windows overlooking a park. The symphony director, an older man named Tan, was already waiting at a corner table. Mei-Lin, he said, standing to greet her. Wonderful to see you again. Over a meal of delicate dumplings and fragrant tea, they discussed the upcoming concert series. The symphony wanted Mei-Lin to be their featured soloist for a tour that would take them to 10 cities across the country. It would be a tremendous opportunity, Director Tan said. And we could include your original compositions as well as classical pieces. It sounds wonderful, Mei-Lin agreed. But she hesitated, uncertain how to express her concerns. But Director Tan prompted gently. I've been thinking about taking some time to visit my village, she explained. It's been 6 months since I left, and I've sent money for the school. But I haven't been back to see how they're using it. I miss home. Director Tan nodded understandingly. The tour doesn't begin for another 2 months. Perhaps you could visit before then? Mei Lin smiled gratefully. Thank you. I'll work with Fang to arrange it. The interview that afternoon took place in a hotel lounge, a space designed to feel intimate while remaining professional. The journalist, a thoughtful woman with kind eyes, asked questions that went beyond the usual inquiries about Mei Lin's sudden rise to fame. You've spoken before about feeling uncertain of your place in the music world, she noted. Has that changed over these months? Mei Lin considered the question carefully. Yes and no. I'm more confident in my playing now. My teachers at the conservatory have helped me improve my technique, and I'm learning music theory properly, but sometimes I still feel like an outsider. Most classical pianists start training when they're very young, with private lessons and expensive instruments. My path has been different. That difference is what many people find inspiring about you, the journalist observed. You've broken the mold of what a classical pianist is expected to be. I never set out to break anything, Mei Lin said with a small laugh. I just wanted to play piano. After the interview, Mei Lin had a brief break before the evening's charity event. She asked her driver to take her to a small park near her apartment. Sitting on a bench under the shade of a maple tree, she watched children playing and parents chatting nearby. Simple, ordinary moments that she sometimes missed in her whirlwind schedule. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had tagged her in a social media post. A video of a young girl playing one of Mei Lin's compositions at a school recital. The caption read, "My daughter was inspired by Mei Lin's story and hasn't stopped practicing since. Thank you for showing her that dreams can come true." Mei Lin smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. These were the moments that meant the most to her, knowing that her music and her journey had touched others in meaningful ways. The charity event that evening was held at Bellini's restaurant, where everything had begun. The place had been transformed for the occasion, with flowers adorning every table and a small stage set up near the grand piano. The event was raising money for music education in rural schools, a cause that Mei Lin had become passionate about supporting. As she entered, she was greeted warmly by Vincent, the manager who had once tried to turn her away. Our guest of honor, he said, with none of the disdain he had shown on that rainy night 6 months ago. We're honored to have you back. The restaurant was filled with people who had paid generously for tickets to the event. Mei Lin recognized some faces, Mrs. Wu, of course, and Director Zhao from the conservatory, along with several musicians she had worked with. Others were strangers, wealthy donors who supported the arts. After a dinner of exquisite food, so different from the simple meal she had been given that first night, Mei Lin was introduced by the charity's director. She stood at the microphone looking out at the sea of expectant faces. 6 months ago, I came to this restaurant hungry and homeless, she began, her voice soft but clear. I had spent my last coins on bus fare to the city, believing I could find a better life here. When I was turned away, I saw the piano in the corner and took a chance. That moment changed everything for me. She paused, gathering her thoughts. But I was lucky. Lucky that someone filmed my playing. Lucky that Mrs. Wu was here that night. Lucky that people connected with my music. There are thousands of talented children in villages like mine who will never get that lucky break. That's why this cause matters so much to me. After her speech, Mei Lin played the piece that had started it all, the composition she had performed that rainy night. As her fingers moved across the keys, she was transported back to that moment of desperation and hope. The music seemed to hold all the emotions of her journey, the hunger, the fear, the determination, and ultimately the joy of being heard. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the restaurant. The donations that evening exceeded all expectations, enough to fund music programs in 20 rural schools. Later, as the event wound down, Mei Lin found herself standing near the entrance, the same spot where Vincent had tried to turn her away months ago. Mrs. Wu joined her, following her gaze. Thinking about that night. Mei Lin nodded. Everything has changed so much. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been desperate enough to sit at that piano, if I had just left when he asked me to. But you didn't leave, Mrs. Wu pointed out. That's what makes your story special, Mei Lin. When faced with rejection, you found another way. You spoke through your music when words failed. As they prepared to leave, a staff member approached Mei Lin with an envelope. This was left for you, she explained. Inside was a handwritten note and a faded photograph of an elderly woman sitting beside a young girl at a piano. The note read, "Dear Mei Lin, I was not at the restaurant the night you played, but my daughter was. She showed me the video, and I recognized something in your playing that reminded me of my mother, who was a piano teacher in a small village for 40 years. Your foundation's work will ensure her legacy lives on through a new generation of musicians. Thank you for remembering where you came from and helping others find their voice." Hua Mei Lin carefully tucked the note and photo into her purse, deeply moved. As her car arrived to take her home, she realized that fame and success were not the true gifts of her journey. The real treasure was the ability to give back, to create opportunities for others, to be a bridge between the world she had come from and the world she now inhabited. Tomorrow, she would call Fang and finalize plans to visit her village. It was time to go back, not as the hungry girl who had left with nothing but a backpack and a dream, but as someone who could make a difference. Her story had only just begun. The small bus rattled along the narrow mountain road, winding its way through green valleys and terraced fields. Mei Lin pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window, watching as the landscape of her childhood came into view. 1 year had passed since she had left her village with nothing but a backpack and dreams. Now she was returning as someone entirely different. She had insisted on taking the regular bus rather than hiring a private car. Despite Fang's protests about comfort and safety, Mei Lin had been firm. "This is how I left," she had explained. "It feels right to return the same way." The only concession she had made was allowing Jen to accompany her. Her loyal assistant sat beside her now, looking curiously at the rural scenery that was so different from the city bustle they were used to. "It's beautiful here," Jen commented. "So peaceful." Mei Lin nodded. "Wait until you see the sunset over the eastern hills. The whole sky turns gold." As the bus rounded a bend, the village came into view. A cluster of buildings nestled in a valley, smoke rising from cooking fires, chickens pecking in dusty yards. Mei Lin's heart quickened. Nothing seemed to have changed, and yet everything had. The bus stopped at the village center, a small paved area with a few shops and the local government office. As Mei Lin stepped down, she noticed people stopping to stare. Word of her arrival must have spread because a small crowd had gathered. An elderly man pushed his way forward, his weathered face breaking into a wide smile. "Teacher Wang," Mei Lin exclaimed, rushing forward to greet the village school principal who had always encouraged her playing. "Our famous pianist returns," he said, his eyes crinkling with joy. "The whole village has been following your story." The children talk of nothing else. More villagers approached. Neighbors, former classmates, shopkeepers who had known her since she was small. They greeted her warmly, though with a new deference that made Mei Lin slightly uncomfortable. She was still the same person who had grown up among them, but in their eyes she had become something more. "The school?" she asked eagerly. "How is the renovation going?" Teacher Wang's face lit up. "You must come and see. We have used your donations wisely." They walked through the village, past familiar houses and gardens, along paths Mei Lin had traveled thousands of times in her childhood. Some children followed at a distance, whispering excitedly to each other. The school building looked transformed. The once crumbling walls had been repaired and painted a cheerful yellow. New windows gleamed in the afternoon sun, and a small garden bloomed with flowers at the entrance. "Come inside," Teacher Wang urged. The classrooms had new desks and bright posters on the walls, but what made Mei Lin stop in her tracks was the music room. Where once there had been only her grandmother's old upright piano, now there stood 5 new keyboards, a collection of traditional instruments, and shelves lined with music books. "This is..." Mei Lin couldn't find the words. "Your music room," Teacher Wang said simply. "Named after your grandmother. 20 children are now receiving music lessons here." Tears filled Mei Lin's eyes. Her grandmother had taught generations of village children with almost no resources. Just her love of music and determination. What might she have accomplished with a room like this? A group of children filed in, led by a young teacher Mei Lin didn't recognize. They lined up shyly, clutching sheets of music. "Our students have prepared something for you," Teacher Wang explained. At a nod from their teacher, the children began to play, a simple arrangement of Mei Lin's most famous composition, the piece she had played that night at the restaurant. Some were on keyboards, others on traditional string instruments and flutes. Their playing was hesitant with occasional wrong notes, but the melody was unmistakable. When they finished, Mei Lin applauded enthusiastically, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "That was beautiful," she told them, meaning every word. "You've been practicing very hard." One little girl, no more than 7 years old, stepped forward. "Will you play for us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Maylene sat at one of the keyboards. It wasn't the grand piano she was used to now, but as her fingers touched the keys, she felt a sense of coming home. She played a new piece she had been working on, inspired by the mountains and valleys of her childhood home. The children watched in wide-eyed wonder. When she finished, their applause was as precious to her as any standing ovation she had received in concert halls around the country. That evening, a feast was prepared in the village square. Tables were pushed together, and everyone brought dishes to share. Maylene sat with Teacher Wong and the village elders, answering questions about her new life and listening to updates about village affairs. "We've been watching all your performances online," one woman told her proudly. "The whole village gathers at the community center whenever you're on television. The younger children all want piano lessons now," another added. "You've become their hero." As night fell and lanterns were lit around the square, someone brought out a portable keyboard. There were calls for Maylene to play, and she obliged willingly, performing both classical pieces and folk songs that everyone could sing along to. Under the starry sky, surrounded by the people who had known her before fame found her, Maylene felt a contentment that had nothing to do with success or recognition. Later, as the celebration wound down, she walked with Teacher Wong to visit her grandmother's grave on a peaceful hillside overlooking the valley. She laid flowers and sat for a while in quiet reflection. "She would be so proud of you," Teacher Wong said gently. "I hope so," Maylene replied. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right things with this opportunity I've been given. What does your heart tell you?" Maylene thought about the children's faces as they played her music, about the renovated school, about the music program she was helping to fund across rural areas. That music should be for everyone, not just those who can afford lessons and instruments. "That's what grandmother believed," Teacher Wong nodded. "Then you are honoring her legacy perfectly." Maylene spent a week in the village, teaching the children, reconnecting with old friends, and finding a piece that had been missing amid the whirlwind of her new life. She promised to return regularly and to continue supporting the school's music program. When it was time to leave, the entire village gathered to see her off. The little girl who had asked her to play that first day presented her with a handmade card signed by all the music students. "Please come back soon," the child said earnestly. "I will," Maylene promised, and meant it. As the bus pulled away, Maylene watched her village recede into the distance. She felt changed by the visit, more grounded, more certain of her purpose. The coming months would be busy, finishing her second album, preparing for the symphony tour, and then something she had only dreamed of, a performance at Carnegie Hall in New York. 3 months later, Maylene stood backstage at the world-famous concert venue, listening to the murmur of the audience beyond the curtain. Her journey had brought her from a remote village to one of the most prestigious stages in the world. In the front row sat Mrs. Wu, who had flown to New York to support her. Also present were Fang, Jen, Director Zhao, and, to Maylene's delight, Teacher Wong, whom she had flown in as a special surprise. Backstage, a delivery man appeared with a large bouquet of flowers. "For Ms. Maylene," he said, handing her an envelope with the arrangement. The card inside read, "From the manager and staff at Bellini's restaurant. Thank you for reminding us to look beyond appearances and listen with our hearts." Maylene smiled, remembering that rainy night that had changed everything. From hungry and homeless to Carnegie Hall in just over a year, a journey she could never have imagined. The stage manager appeared at her elbow. 2 minutes, Ms. Maylene." As she prepared to walk on stage, Maylene thought about all the twists and turns her path had taken. The hunger that had driven her to that restaurant, the desperation that had given her courage to sit at the piano, the kindness of strangers that had opened doors, the viral video that had carried her music to the world, but most of all, she thought about the children in her village, practicing on the new keyboards in the music room named after her grandmother. She thought about other villages, other children who might never have the chance to discover their talents without help. She thought about the foundation she had established, which was already funding music education in 50 rural schools. Her name was announced, and applause filled the hall. Maylin walked onto the stage with confidence, no longer the frightened girl who had once trembled before an audience. She bowed deeply, acknowledging the welcome, then seated herself at the magnificent grand piano. Before beginning to play, she took a moment to speak to the audience. "A year ago, I was turned away from a restaurant because I looked poor and hungry," she said simply. "But when I played the piano that night, people listened not to what they saw but to what they heard. Music became my voice when I had no other way to speak." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "Tonight, I play for everyone who has ever felt invisible or unheard, and for the children in villages like mine, who might never know their own talents without someone to guide them." As her fingers touched the keys and the first notes filled the hall, Maylin felt her grandmother's presence beside her. "Your fingers speak what your heart feels," she had always said. Tonight, Maylin's heart was full, of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, and of hope for the journey still to come. The melody soared to the highest balconies of Carnegie Hall, carrying with it the story of a girl who had once been refused a meal, until she sat at a piano and dazed the whole world with her music.